with you from Israel in the Galilee on Sunday the 10th. It's 9:49 in the morning here. We're at 72 degrees, high is 79, and we might have showers today. Let's see if they're still up on that theory. 40% chance. I don't know what that means, but they're looking about 5 in the evening, just a little bit. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is go into the live stream and make sure we got sound and picture while people are coming in. And I'm going to put a couple of very fast posts up there. So what I'm going to do now is we got sound and picture. Now I'm going to put up some quick posts. And I'm going to put my email address up. Almost done. Okay. I'm going to do some praise, being a Bible-believing site. There is no God like Jehovah. 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 There is no Messiah like Yeshua. 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 Okay. So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover what the nations are saying is going to happen, or what they think is going to happen, or what they're predicting. And we're going to compare it with what the Bible says. We're going to put a heavy emphasis on Donald Trump, okay? I'm going to go through some of the things that Trump is promising to do, and some of the things he's saying regarding Israel, and we're going to look at that, and we're going to break it down and see how Trump is going to get there. Now, then we're going to talk about what the Bible prophecies say about a lot of this stuff, okay? And we're going to compare them, and we're also going to cover Putin and Iran and, the whole lot, all right? So, first thing I want to talk about is Trump and Israel. Trump told Netanyahu he has to end the Gaza war before January 20th. The same with Hezbollah, and now the same with Iran. Now, who the heck is he to tell Israel what to do? Ask yourself, is this a man of God? Okay. Ask yourself. It's no point me cramming it down your throat. You ask yourself. See what you think. Okay? Is he respective of the land covenant that God made with Israel from the Euphrates to the Nile? That would include about 2/3 of Turkey west of the Euphrates, major pieces of Iraq and Syria west of the Euphrates, all of Lebanon, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, east of the Nile River, Sudan and South Sudan, east of the Nile River, Uganda and Kenya, east of the Nile River, and then it would be Ethiopia, Eritrea, Somalia, and Djibouti. It's about 100 times bigger than the Israel we have now. So ask yourself, does Trump seem to be respective of what God says? Now, you're going to see me come into things, and first of all, I want to start out with this. Overall, for people that live in America, is Trump better than the Biden or the Kamala creatures? Of course. Okay? Is Trump better for Israel? Probably. Remains to be seen, but it looks like it. Now, is Trump working with God? Because if he was, he wouldn't be going against Bible prophecy. Okay? So you gotta have yourself a long talk about that. And there's nothing in Jeremiah 50 and 51 that says that Israel's going to have some great leader that's going to bail it out. It's just not there. Okay? And he's one of them. How do you think he got to be a billionaire and president? Come on. You got to snap out of the Trump euphoria. You know, there's a scripture I want to find here, and I've got to look it up in Google for a minute. I don't know if I'm going to find it that easily. Yeah, I just found it. That was a quick one. Jeremiah 51:14. I'll read it to you. Very few people picked up on this, if any of them. This is about daughter of Babylon being destroyed. Jeremiah 51:14. Jehovah of hosts has sworn by himself, saying, surely I will fill thee with men as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. Now, isn't that interesting? And Trump just referred, let me get the reference for you. Trump referred to the illegals in America, the migrant illegals, as caterpillars in the last day or two. I don't know what to make of that. I don't think Trump knew Jeremiah 51:14, but he did call them caterpillars. Maybe he did know it, I don't know. But I thought that was rather interesting. I don't know what it means, if anything, but I thought it was worthy of note. Trump is, let's do our prayer request before I forget the toss request. We have a toss for JM, Jack Mike, JM or Juliet Mike toss. A toss for a business called Grease, GRIS, G-R-I-S. It's a voodoo term, okay, of some voodoo amulet. So toss for a business called Grease, G-R-I-S, repeated with a hyphen, G-R-I-S. We go toss the owners and employees. We have a toss request for Mike, Mike, toss. And we have a healing prayer request for someone we'll refer to as S, the letter S, like Sierra. And for S, pray for healing with the brain, for S, okay? All right, we got that covered. Trump is saying he's going to get a law passed, and I think he could, where there's going to be, okay, the term CCW means carry concealed weapons, okay? He's going to get a law passed, and this has been the dream of the NRA going back probably in the late 90s or the early 2000s, for a long time, good 20 years. Have a law passed for reciprocity amongst the states with CCW permits. So that means if you have a driver's license in Nevada, you could drive in Hawaii, Florida, New York, okay? Well, they want to do the same thing with the gun permits. So if you have a gun permit from your state, be it Texas, Florida, Nebraska, or whatever, you can carry your gun concealed in New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Illinois, Washington, D.C., Maryland, California. Now, you have to understand this, okay? This is going to be as unacceptable to people, specifically in places like California and probably about 8 or 9 states in America. Okay? This is going to be so reprehensible to them, so repulsive. You have no idea. I do, and I hope you do. They are just going to go nuts. You got to look at a guy coming from Wyoming wearing a hat like mine with cowboy boots, packing a gun in California, going sightseeing. This, they can't stand. Also New York, New Jersey, very, very, New York City, not so much New York State. New York City, New Jersey, very, very tight gun laws. Very tight. Chicago, Illinois, Michigan has, I believe, tight gun laws. I have to think what the other ones are. I think Maryland's not so bad. DC, I think, has tight gun laws. I'd have to look at it, but there's probably 7 to 9 states that just really hate the concept of civilians with guns. This is going to cause a massive uprising in these states. They're not going to feel safe. They have values and morals contrary to the vast majority of America. Also, the criminals in these states thrive because when you have tight gun control, they can go rip people off, you know, armed robberies in the street, or maybe without even a gun or a knife, just knock people down or punch them or something like that. Old people, young people, crippled people, weak people. And now they're not going to be able to do that safely. Criminals have a fear. Okay? Once when I was a deputy sheriff as a young guy, which it was in California of all places, I was asking, a guy in the jail, I said, well, why what is it that the inmates fear the most about the cops? And he said that they could kill you and get away with it. And this guy was a jailbird. He was in and out of prisons. He was a trustee of mine when I was working in the county jail. And I was not a corrections officer. I was a regular deputy sheriff, not a corrections officer. But I was spent time in the county jail. So I I said, wow, and once he was talking to me about, not getting tickets. Cops generally don't get tickets, although in the last 15, 20 years that's changed. And, I explained to him, listen, I could go drive through a red light, okay? But if a guy hits me, T-bones me, what good does a badge do? I'm clobbered. I'm going to the hospital. My car's totaled, I said, you got to watch that stuff, and you do, if your speed limit's 70 and you want to move, you go maybe 82, 84 or something like that, so you could just keep moving ahead of the cars, right? But you start driving at 100 miles an hour, you got to have a really good car, because the regular cars you buy are not really designed to run around at 100 miles an hour. What do I mean? The tires and the brakes and the suspension and the steering and all of that are not set up for it. Okay? They're not. Now, the police cars that would put good tires on them, they'd have better brakes than regular cars, heavy duty brakes, but not so great. Sway bars, this is the old days, So you had a car that was built more for it, but it was still, I remember being with this old detective once late at night, and he had his girlfriend in the car with him, and I was in the back seat because they were like holding hands and all that stuff, and this is an official police car. And he wanted to cover ground. He had to drop her off at her house or something like that. And he wanted to move. And he's sitting there driving with his left hand on the steering wheel, his right arm draped on the seat by her, running a steady 100 miles an hour. Now, this went on for at least 10 minutes. It was late at night. It was like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning on a weeknight. There was nothing on the road. But, this was not an enjoyable experience for me to be sitting there, in his car running at 100, with him with one hand on the wheel, Cops get in a habit of driving very, very fast. It took me a long time to break that habit, years, and it's, some cops, when they would come to a stop, they would turn the wheel so if the brakes didn't work, they wouldn't hit the car in front of them. These are the old days, and the cars weren't so good, So, you got to balance that. But anyway, when you got CCW, carry concealed weapon, and you want to go to San Francisco and go to Pier 39 and Fisherman's Wharf and Ghiardelli Square, you're not a mark or a target, okay, anymore. Because you could be packing a gun, and then the guy comes over to you and presents a knife or something, or says he's going to shoot you or stab you, and you go, boom, and you put 2 in his chest, and he's down. Or you go, boom, and you miss, and you hit him in the pelvic, and his pelvic breaks, and his wheelchair time, forever. This sort of thing. Street people that go rob other people on the street are in a desperate condition. Okay? Cartels don't do this. Organized criminals don't do this. This is a junkie, a bum, normally a junkie, maybe a homeless person seeing an opportunity and trying to take advantage of it. It's a crime of opportunity. But, they're able to feed on the public because, you're in a place where it's very unlikely civilians have a lot of gun permits, and You hang around a supermarket at 9:30 at night. In the winter, it's dark and raining, and you see an old man or an old lady, stumbling to their car holding a bag of groceries, and you could just run up on them and, grab them, present a weapon, or just clobber them in the head and take their wallet or their purse, or you could grab them and make them go to the ATM machine and get a cash pull, and, all kinds of junk like that, right? And, the chances of the person having a weapon are rather low. But if you do that in Florida, or Texas, where there's a lot of people carrying guns, you know, the old man or the old lady sees you coming up on them, and they put their hand on the gun, and they just could shoot you. It's not that hard. They're going to shoot you 3, 4, 5, 6 feet. It's, it's going to change criminality in these states. And these states with serious gun control are always high crime states, no exception. 100% of the time, it's always the case. Okay? There is no such thing as a state with rigid gun laws where people can't really carry guns that has a low crime rate. It doesn't exist, and it's not going to exist in America. It just doesn't exist. Forget it. So what are these criminals going to do? I don't know. It'll be interesting. You think they're just going to go and say, well, heck, I got to go get in a rehab and get off my drugs and go get a job asking people if they want fries with that. No. It's going to be a situation. I really don't know how it'll play out or if prophetically time will allow for it. But overall, it's a good law. The other problem with this law is there's certain states, not many, I think it's Vermont or Maine, or there's a few states. Oh, now there's quite a few. There's probably 20, 25, at least 15, that say you don't need a permit to carry a gun concealed. You just got to not be a felon or or what's the other thing? Dishonorable discharge from the military or something like that. Psychiatric records, I don't know, stuff like that. So you can't, so if you're carrying a concealed weapon and the cop approaches you and you say, yeah, I got a concealed gun, and he says, okay, no problem. He says, are you eligible to have a gun? And the guy says, yeah. Can the cop in the street with his radio get verification of that? And probably unlikely. Maybe if there was a curious situation, he could, but I mean, there's radio traffic time. If it's peak hour, there's a lot of traffic on the. I don't know. It's going to depend on the department, the state, how bad the cop wants to find out, and how much time he has. But I imagine a lot of people could buff their way through it and not get caught. The cop could, if they don't have any ID and they're carrying a concealed weapon, then they could give the cop any name they want. And then the cop has to check that name and get a picture from a driver's license. It's confusing. I don't know how it'll play. But that's been going on for years. It's a problem for the cops, not for me to solve. That's their problem. But now these people, if they want to travel to other states, they're going to have to go get the carry concealed weapons permit from their state, which a lot of people don't want to do because they think their concealed weapons permit is the Second Amendment, and they're right, but they're not going to want to do that. So that's interesting. I don't think Trump has an ulterior motive about that. I just think that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Okay. He's also saying that people are going to have a right to sue politicians that pass laws that are probably not constitutional and did policies that are against the Constitution. So people that ruined communities um, by creating sanctuary cities and things like that can be sued by the we the people for economic damages, probably personal. Is that law? That law is probably not going to pass, and it's probably going to have a lot of enforcement problems. But maybe it would pass. I don't know. It'll have enforcement difficulties, believe me. So America sends Austin to tell Israel, the defense Secretary of Defense of America, that Israel has a week to fix 1 week to fix the humanitarian aid situation in the Gaza, uh, to suit the wishes of the United States, whatever those humanitarian aid conditions are, uh, or whether they are not, I don't know. I mean, I think it's arbitrary by America, but they intend, this is the warning they gave Israel. I don't think it's any really big deal, because I think Israel will just do it. They're going to scratch their head and say, this schmuck buying that, yeah, do it, bring the aid in. That's all that's going to happen. But the fact that they threaten Israel, you see, they don't care about God. They have no fear of God. Neither does Trump. And that's what they're doing. That's America. Now, a lot of people, I'm afraid, I don't know for sure, are thinking that this Trump guy is rehabilitating America and it's not going to be destroyed. And let me tell you, Trump is absolutely doing, I would think, things that are good for the people of America, especially economically, and we're going to get into that. But he is not walking with God in his policies and practices whatsoever. Okay? Zero evidence of that. Trump is talking about ending income tax. Now, this is a deep subject, and I studied income tax in the Federal Reserve many, many years ago, quite a lot. And in subsequent years, not as much, but pretty deeply. What you need to understand about this is in 1913, when Congress was on a Christmas break, they passed a Federal Reserve Act and the Income Tax Act, which created the IRS. So the Federal Reserve was given the power to manufacture money. And they would charge, so the American government would tell Federal Reserve Bank, manufacture $600 million, and they would, out of thin air, just in the computer, but back then they didn't have computers. And they would charge the United States government interest on that additional money that the United States would have the IRS collect that interest from the people with unjust, unfair taxation, like taxing your earnings. It's nuts, right? But they did it. And before 1913, you were not taxed on your earnings. How did America create taxes? Well, they taxed imports. The federal government had the right to put tariffs or taxes on imported goods. So if you brought coffee in from Brazil or Hong Kong or silk or cotton or whatever you brought in, they could impose tariffs on it and raise money that way. That was the Constitution. You're not going to see that in restored Israel, nor are you going to see an income tax in restored Israel, nor are you going to see Israelis paying interest to other Israelis. So the banks in Israel are doomed, Forget about them. All right. So it's against the law to charge a fellow Israeli interest. Okay. It's against the Torah. All right. You can charge the nation's interest, but not your fellow Israeli. And remember, if you're in Yeshua, the Messiah, you're in Israel. I didn't say if you're in the church, you're in Israel. I said if you're really serving Yeshua, you're in Israel. Now, you'll obviously be living here. And a lot of people don't like that, so are they really in Israel? You know, are they really in Yeshua, or are they in America or Europe or whatever, you know? But anyway, so the people, this is the sickness of this, okay? The Federal Reserve Bank is not a government institution. It's a private business with special charter from the government of the United States to exist. The original owners of the Federal Reserve Bank, the board of directors, were revealed, but they're long dead. Do we know who owns the Federal Reserve Bank now, the board of directors? We don't know any of them, who they are. Their names are confidential. They have an employee, I think they call him the president of the Federal Reserve Bank, you know. He's a stooge. He makes, what, $200,000, $400,000 a year or something like that. Gets a limousine, bodyguards, expense account. You know, he's not one of them, okay? He'd be an S-bot, but he's not the elite. The profit from the Federal Reserve goes to these owners, the board of directors. And they, by written law in America, federal law, they don't have to pay tax on this money. So these people by now are trillionaires, and the IRS is their collection agency. You know how nice they are, okay? So what Trump is doing is he's saying we're not going to have, you know, the IRS taxes. In other words, you're not going to have taxes on Social Security, taxes on your wages, no capital gains tax. Self-employed business people aren't going to pay tax on their profits. Corporations aren't going to have tax on profits, okay? State sales tax is not something Trump can mess with. It's the states doing it, so that's going to still be there. City, county, state property tax is still going to be there. Okay, that's not going away. So the first thing is you probably are going to get rid of perhaps over 1 million people that are involved in working with the taxation, the federal taxation system in America, the accountants, the CPAs, the income tax preparers, those kind of people, and the 500,000 or so IRS employees. Now, that's going to take years to wind it down because there's going to be people, they can audit people for 2 years. I think it's 2 years, or it might be 3. So if, you know, Trump does this, he would possibly tell them that, well, he's probably not going to tell them they can't audit people, or because that would be making a retroactive law, because when they had income in, let's say, the year 2020 or 21, and the IRS is after them, you know, back in 2020, 21, 22, 23, even 24, there was lawful taxation according to the federal government, so, not according to me, but according to the federal government, so they would be allowed to keep that up. So the IRS would probably initially lay off half their people, and then in about 3 years, out of the other half, probably 20% would remain working on various cases and finishing it up, and then it'd be 10%, and they'd probably always, for 10 years, you'd probably have 4 or 5,000 of them running around working, but they're not going to be, they're just going to be wrapping up stuff. What are they going to do with people that owe the IRS? Is Trump going to do forgiveness of debt? Trump's not big on forgiveness, so I would say no. It's just an interesting thing. And he intends to bolster the income of the United States with tariffs on imported goods. And I believe he intends to use the Navy to patrol the waters, but I don't think the Navy's going to interdict ships. It's not necessary. So, Biden uses the Navy to patrol international waters. It's standard operating procedure. I don't know what's so different about that. Nothing. So you have to understand that this move is the type of brilliant move you would get from an accomplished businessman. Does it make economic sense? It's a 9 on a 10 scale, 10 being the best. It's fantastic. The other efforts to get rid of the IRS were a VAT tax or a sales tax. So when you went to the store and you bought a shirt, you had to pay 17% tax. Okay? This system is rather stupid because if you make $30,000 a year and you buy this overcoat for $100, right? You're going to pay 17%. And if you make $492 million a year, you're going to pay 17%. The thought is that the wealthy people are going to spend more money and thus pay more taxes. But the wealthy people are going to put a lot of purchases in corporations. They're going to get around it, okay? They're going to get around it. Now I'm going to tie this to BRICS and show you what Trump's really doing with BRICS. And this is going to make you think Trump is even more brilliant. And he understands business. This is the advantage of having a businessman in the White House instead of a politician that's accomplished nothing in his whole life except go out and bark promises to people that rarely get fulfilled. So Trump is not chasing the 17% VAT tax for taxes because it's stupid and it's not fair. And it does have an easy collection remedy because the stores and the shopkeepers and stuff like that will be collecting the money and sending it in to the IRS, or somehow go to the IRS and then Federal Reserve Bank or something. So that's not happening, okay? He's not talking about that. It's a flawed system, okay? Now, can America make it on that? Well, the thing is, probably, but the tariffs on imported goods, you're probably looking at, I would say, 15 to 25%. What's that going to do? You're going to see the brilliance of this. I'm telling you, this is a brilliant move. What it's going to do is it's going to make imported goods very expensive in America, no matter what they are. Okay? You could buy shoelaces from China and they're going to go up. It's probably going to be 20 to 30%. It's going to be pretty steep. 20% anyway, I guess. So, whatever you buy, now, let's say you want to buy a Mercedes-Benz. Not a top of the line for $450,000. A nice Mercedes, say $80,000. Let's say $100,000. They go up in price. So now your car costs you $120,000. Now Trump might put different tariffs on different products. You have to understand that. That's common in a lot of countries. So if you were bringing in educational supplies, the tariff might be 5%. If you're bringing in a luxury car, it might be, Israel has 100 to 150% tax. Trump might say the tax on that is, 35%. So what he's doing is he's putting out of business. Let me read you the list of people: Mercedes, BMW, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Volkswagen, Fiat, Citroën, Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, Nissan, Lexus. What am I missing? Well, Porsche, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Bugatti, but that's, those cars are in the hundreds every year, So all these cars, now, when you're talking of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini for $500,000, he might put 100% tax on that. Okay? So what does this do? It makes the American car manufacturers, and again with trucks and buses, Volvo and Mercedes are big in the bus business. The Korean and Japanese car manufacturers are big in the truck business. Not just buses, now we're on trucks, okay? So, you're talking about a plain Jane Fiat or Volkswagen, the tax might be 20-30%, but if you're talking, about a $150,000 BMW, the tax might be 60 or 100%. So the car manufacturers overseas are going to lose their market in America. Not completely, their competitiveness goes down the drain. So the American car manufacturers can sadly raise prices, which they probably will do, but not right away. It allows them to be more competitive without doing anything. They just sit there like their own goofy selves, and all of a sudden their sales are going to go up 40, 60, 80% or whatever. The foreign car market's going to drop like a rock, and the motorcycle market will drop like a rock. A lot of motorcycles are manufactured overseas. Honda, Suzuki, Kawasaki, BMW. There's a lot of them. There's very few in America. You got Harley Davidson, Indian, which is really more of a connoisseur, specialty collector type motorcycle. But Harley Davidson does manufacture a full gamut of motorcycles, dirt bikes, big bike, so they'll soar. Probably companies overseas would come to America, hire, like Honda and Suzuki and Kawasaki, hire Americans and manufacture the product under the label Suzuki, Kawasaki, whatever, in America. So you might see, instead of seeing Honda on the motorcycle, you might see Honda USA or Kawasaki USA. So the countries on good terms with America would do that. They'd open up a plant, bring the right machinery, the molds and all that stuff over here, and the blueprints, and train the people and start making their own motorcycle. That would take a couple of years, so you probably don't have time to ever see that, but that would be their plan. But it's going to really hurt the cars. Now, there's a lot of money that moves in cars, okay? What else is going to move? Clothing. A ton of your clothes that you buy are coming from manufacturing overseas. That is also going to change. because the Americans could be more competitive. Computers and computer components, that'll change. Um, Firearms will change. You know, a lot of the guns are not made in America. You know, years ago I used to think, and I still would today, say the Beretta 92 FS. It's like what the Army used to use until a few years ago in a 9mm. I don't like 9mm that much, but if you get the the hot ammo, like the Plus P is usually good enough, or the Plus P Plus, and you can put those in a Beretta. It's an all metal gun, you know, basically, and it doesn't jam. The design is excellent. The accuracy is phenomenal. And you know, there was an American-made Beretta 92 FFs and an Italian. And when I bought mine, I made sure I got the Italian version, which I think was better. You know, Heckler and Koch is excellent pistols, excellent guns, rifles, but they're made in Germany. Prices are high, but they're going to really get high. 6 Sauers overseas. A lot of guns are overseas. Ruger, Colt, Smith and Wesson, Kimber. Oh, there's quite a few are made in America. There's quite a few. You can get a good assortment. If you get the Smith and Wesson custom shop guns, they're phenomenal. I mean, they're, I don't know, 20 years ago they were $1,200 for a pistol, right? But I don't know what they are today, probably a little more, 15, 16. Those things are great, you know. There's a lot of junk guns that gun dealers sell for people that take the gun, load it, put it in a desk drawer and never fire it, real pieces of garbage. The market's flooded with those. They don't work. Now, if you get the revolvers, they're probably going to work. But if you get the semi-automatic pistols, they don't work. I've seen them. I made the mistake of buying a few. They actually don't work. You know, they're garbage. But people don't know any better and they buy them. So clothing is going to change. Shoes, which is clothing. Furniture. Appliances. You know, washers, dryers, dishwashers, refrigerators, ovens, you know, air fryers, microwaves, stoves. That stuff's coming overseas, guys. That's going to go up in value and create more opportunity. So Trump is basically going to hurt a lot of foreign countries, but would this actually make America great again economically? It would. A lot? Yes. A lot. What would it do? Well, prophetically, time won't allow, but if you gave it a year and a half, 2.5 years, it would cause a lot of investment in factories, a lot of jobs constructing these factories, okay, and a lot of employment because the American goods are going to have more, they'll be more competitive. And the manufacturers are going to know that they got to make a good product. They can't make pure junk. Like China makes a lot of stuff that's pure junk, you know. You go and you buy these screwdrivers and wrenches and hand tools in Walmart made in China. You know, they don't last very long. You might get a year out of them depending how much you use it, you know, or 2 years. But the old days, like when I was a kid and you bought tools, they'd last your whole lifetime and they would last for your children's lifetime. They just about wouldn't wear out. That's when tools were tools, you know. My father had the same electric drill probably for 40 years. It still kept working. He had wrenches and screwdrivers he had when he was a kid. And you know, he died, he was rather old, you know. They just, but, you know, along comes Walmart in China and they manufacture pure trash. And people buy them because they're cheap and there's precious little market for hand tools that really last a long time. Precious little. I'm sure you could find it if you know where to go. But, you know, they have to use good steel, and that's the expense they don't want to spend, you know. Televisions, I mean, it's just going to change everything. And it would take a few years, probably 2 to 3 years, for it to really kick in America. But it would, if prophetically time allowed, which it doesn't, it would allow America to become more of 1950s America, which is isolationist. A lot of you are not old enough to understand or remember this, but back then America grew its own food. It wasn't using bad agricultural sprayed products for bugs. It wasn't doing GMO or any of that. And the food was really good. Okay, and they had cattle, they had pork, chickens, turkey, whatever, right? All the crops, and they were growing their own food. Now, they also were importing food from Central and South America at the same time. This is true too. And they were getting the food dirt cheap over there, a lot of problems. But a lot of the food in the 50s was really not that much coming out of Central and South America. It was, you know, certain things, bananas and, you know, coconuts, but, you know, a lot of the corn and, you know, the barley and various, you know, grains were coming out of America. Garlic, for instance, lots of things, okay? Lots of things. And America was making the cars. The cars in the 50s were in America where the cats meow. They were making the radios at RCA, Emerson, all different kinds. They were making the TVs, Zenith, RCA, I can't remember all the brands they had. They were making the trucks, you know, Peterbilt and Mack and all these others in America, right? They were making watches in America, like Timex, and, you know, they didn't have Citizen and Seiko running around then. They were making cameras, not too much, but quite a bit in America, Kodak and Polaroid. But the Japanese cameras and the German cameras were still very, very popular in the 50s. Clothing tremendous amount of it came from America. Now they imported wool and made it into clothes in America and stuff like that. And a lot of it was imported, fine silks and fabrics and, you know, things like that were going on. But a lot of it was in America. Furniture was mostly in America. We had our own lumber. We had our own steel. We had oil wells and had oil. Lots of food, beef, chickens were coming out of America. So, you know, it was the isolationist America, but America wasn't really isolationist. It was imperialistic at the same time. Had America stayed isolationist, it would have been a fantastically good country, you know, but it didn't. It invested insanely in the military and went around conquering, you know. So I can't tell you how sound this is enough. It's super sound, but it's not pleasing God that Trump wants to revitalize America economically, and America is going to march on with its lousy policies towards Israel and around the world. It's not going to help America. So it's probably never going to come to pass. It's going to take too much time. But it is brilliant, okay? And it will hurt bricks. Now, without an IRS, the United States can return to private banking. there's no reason to put these tight controls on Americans banking overseas or anything anymore, because the capital gains tax, the income tax, there is none. So what the heck do they care? Now, money laundering and things like that, well, most of the money laundering that they're really worried about is tax evasion, which is not an issue anymore if he eliminates the IRS. And then you get into the drug cartels. And Trump said he has every intention of destroying the drug cartels. Can he destroy the drug cartels? 100%. How long would that take? Months, not years. Quick. How does he control it? Well, he has to stop the smuggling. The customs only searches about 2% of the containers coming into the country. That 2% would probably have to get jacked up to 20% for a while. And that would cause not 100% stop the flow of drugs, but it would cause the confiscations to become punitive to the cartels. It would be very expensive. He can't do 100% of them. But he can make the losses rather expensive for them, and they start rethinking how they're doing it. And then he used the military to stop them from coming in with these makeshift submarines that barely go under the surface with drugs, or private boats. And, you know, they're going to pick more and more and more. But the other thing he's going to do is he's going to run the dealers off the street corners. You see, the DEA policy has been to go after the big fish. What if the DEA went after all the corner drug dealers in America, which they don't do? But if they did, what would happen? Well, you would have the domino theory, where the dominoes push over the other dominoes, starting at the bottom, the corner pusher. You get rid of the corner pushers, what are the drug dealers going to do with their drugs? They themselves are millionaires. They're not going to go out on the street and stand there huddled up in a hoodie and say, you know, $8 a bag or 12 a bag. You know, they're not going to do that. They get busted. So if you really wanted to stop them, contrary to what the Americans have been telling the people all along, you don't go after the high-level drug dealers. You can, but you go after the street dealer. And that's the end of the whole thing. How they're going to move their product to market. They know how to smuggle it in. They know how to grow it. They know all, but they need the guy on the street selling it. Without the guy on the street selling it, they got nothing. How did they get rid of the liquor in Prohibition? Well, they hit the places where they manufactured it, but they also went around hitting the little guy that was selling it. The bodega type places that opened up that were serving liquor, you know, where it was, you know, they were all over the cities. They, you know, would be like a nightclub or a bar, and people would go in, and you had to know where it was, and people would go in and order drinks, liquor. Some of them had entertainment. They used to build them outside the cities in the county, where they corrupted the sheriff. The sheriff was one of them, and they built a big nightclub that would seat 100 or 200 people. They had live music and shows, and they served alcohol. A lot of times they had prostitution, strippers, all kinds of sick things. And they got away with it. Well, the feds, you know, were occasionally raid that, but that's the stuff. See, they tell you, oh, you got to get the big guys. Well, no, you don't. All you got to do is get the little petty street dealers. And you finish them off. And the street dealers are easy to find. The DEA agents are treated like executives. They have their own secretaries, they have offices. That's not what you need. You need them out on the street, on rooftops with binoculars, in vans with peepholes with binoculars, looking for the drug dealers, and then 2 or 3 of them jump out of the truck and they run after the guy and they pull guns on him and they arrest him. And you go ahead and you do that in a city, for 2 weeks. That whole zone, well, or the area in the city, or the whole city, people can't buy the drugs. The big shots that are very wealthy aren't going to go out on the street and start selling the drugs because they don't want to go away for 5 to 10 years or get shot. You understand how easy it is? It's easy if you want to do it, but if you're dealing somewhere in the world with a country that's corrupt and getting money from the cartels, then you tell the people, oh, we got to hit the big ones and not go around and run the little dealers off the street. That would end it. New dealers would pop up. Yeah, in the beginning, but then when you get the new dealers and then you get the next generation of new dealers, well, they're going to stop too. And they're going to roll over on the bosses, and then you'll get the bosses, and, but you can destroy the market for them like that. Now, they're always going to sell some drugs. You're not going to get rid of 100%, but you could probably get rid of 75% of it without much trouble. All right. So while you're out there eliminating the drugs, you also can control the illegal, what they call illegal immigrants or migrants. Now, the federal agents can go after the migrants and then at the same time go after the drug dealers, which are frequently going to be migrants or illegals that came into the country illegally. Perhaps they legalized by filing asylum. So Trump wants to deport these people. Can Trump deport these people? Yes, but we got to talk about how you're going to do it. The guy that was a big shot in ICE in Texas after 26 years or something and retired, he says he thinks there's 30 to 50 million of these illegals in the country, and their numbers growing by the week. It's massive. Massive. So what would Trump do? Well, initially, he would just enforce existing laws with the existing law enforcement. Now, you got to understand, increasing the ranks of ICE, DEA, people like that, is a lengthy process. First, you need the budget to hire them, and that could take a year. So you can forget that with prophetic timelines. Next, they've got to put out recruitment notices and then get applications. That's weeks, a month, 2 months. Then the applicants come in for an interview. This is just a preliminary interview. And they see if they got a match. And then if they like the person on the interview, and the person already would have passed the written test before the interview, then they start doing a background investigation on this person. These are very expensive. They can go easily $100,000 or more. Now, the agencies hate doing background investigations on somebody that's 34 years old, been out of college for 12 years, had 4 jobs, lived in 3 different locations. That's somebody they're likely are not interested in hiring because the background investigation is pretty tedious. They got to go to every place this guy lived and find people that know him. And when you give them references, they talk to your references, which they require And then from your references, they develop unsolicited references. This is how background investigations work in a rather standard way. Oh, you knew Larry since you moved in the same building or the same neighborhood for 11 years. Oh, was Larry athletic? Did he play ball and stuff? Yeah. Oh, did Larry seem to you to be the type of child that behaved? And yeah, yeah. Was he ever in trouble? No. Was he ever with a gang? Was he known to be in fights? Stuff like that, right? Was he in good health? Tell me about his health. Do you know anything? Was he limping? This kind of thing. Did he have a lot of operations? Did he go to the doctors? What? And if they can't, then they might just stand in front of the building, and when people walk by to go into the building, they say, "Hi, my name's Special Agent Johnson. I'm with, whatever agency. I'm with ICE or whatever. Do you live here? Yeah, what's this about? Why are you asking me if I live here? Well, I want to know if you know somebody. I'm conducting a background investigation for a job hire. Could I ask you about somebody? Yeah, yeah, sure. What do you want to know?" And they might show a picture and say, "Do you know this person who used to live here?" This is expensive and tedious and takes time, and then the agent has to take his notes, go back to the office, fill out official forms, put it all in there. And that's every place the person lived and every place the person worked. And they got to go verify the person went to high school where he said, where he went to college where he said, try to find people in college that knew him, teachers that knew him. It's expensive. So they hate that. So a lot of the highly qualified people, these goofs are not going to hire because of the background investigation. So what are they looking for? They're looking for somebody that was in the military and had a background investigation in the military for security clearance, which is very valid to these federal law enforcement agencies. And then the person got out of the military briefly, maybe a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and had one job and lived in one place. So they look at that and they say, "Oh, okay, so I go to, Tuscaloosa, uh, you know, Ruby Lane, and I find people on the street that knew him, and I interview them for 5 to 10 minutes. And then I go to where he worked, and I interview a few people where he worked, and I'm done. Then and I check the police records and stuff, and then I got my background investigation from the military, so I just have to pick up that 5 years, and he had one job, he was a policeman or Highway Patrol. That's who they're looking for. So a lot of times the best qualified candidates don't get in because these goofballs don't want to spend the time and money to run a background investigation. Now the military has almost an amazing, huge budget, so they run background investigations all the time. Okay, so when you become a federal agent, which I briefly was once, you are going to be hired and go to different schools. In your first year, you're on probation. So you're going to go to the basic, let's call it basic training school. And, all the federal agents from different agencies go to the same place. How to get a search warrant, how to do a felony car stop, how to interface with the police, what is a fingerprint, what is evidence, what is a crime, all this stuff, right? So they get all this stuff as standard training, and that's usually roughly about 10 or 12 weeks. And then from there, they go to a specialized school for their agency, like the IRS or Homeland Security, right? And that could be anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the school. So they're in about 5 or 6 months now. Then they go to work, and the agency is usually very careful about keeping them away from trouble, okay? So they don't want them running around like loose cannons, okay, by themselves. So what they use them for a lot in that probation period is background investigations, where they're not going to really have much of an opportunity to use a firearm and stuff like that. Now, it could be a little hairy because they might have to do background investigations in a really bad neighborhood, but how many people are applying to work for a federal law enforcement agency that came from a drug infested ghetto? Almost none. So they're really not going there that much. And if they did have to go there, they'd probably send them with an experienced agent, and they would dress like they belonged in the neighborhood or something like that. Okay. What else can they use them for? Surveillance, where they're not going to have encounters with people that are hostile. They don't want them getting involved in assaults or shooting, having fights with people to bring them in submission and handcuff them, doing auto stops. They don't want any of this. So they put them in an apartment or an office they rent, and they sit there and they listen to audio recordings live, and they watch maybe through cameras or with telescopes or combinations thereof. A lot of times it's binoculars and telescopes watching people come and go and taking pictures of them from a distance, So they're in this apartment. They're sitting there eating, supersized meat with fries, and they're texting on their phone, and they're, they can't go to sleep. That could cost them big time. But, they're out of the weather, and they keep the lights down. They're very discreet. They show them how to do it. Or they might have them sit in a van in the street in the cold with a porta potty and watch somebody from the van. They're not going to probably ever have them do, live surveillance of people, because that could cause a problem. So they keep them out of trouble. And after they're off probation, then they start exercising them. Then there's usually more schools they go to. They don't want to put them into more schools till they get them off probation, because it costs them a lot of money. So why am I telling you all this? Trump blowing up the size of these federal agencies is a slow-moving freight train. He's going to have to start with what he has now. Oh, he'll start expanding, but it may take 2 years, or at least many months till these people hit the streets. Many months. So what do? Let's say they want to clean out the illegals in Oregon. There's cartels in Oregon they want to get, right? The locals are probably not going to be very interested in helping them, and their mayor could tell the police chief, you're not going to help them, and that kind of stuff's going to go on. So there's a project, an apartment complex, 6 or 8 buildings, 20 stories high. I'm just making this up. And the cartel's running it. So what do? They bring in 30 or 50 federal agents. Probably, let's say they bring 50. Out of the 50, 10 might be SWAT trained, And they go into the project probably in groups of 4 or 6 initially. And they got street clothes on, and they walk up on the dealers. They know who the dealers are on the street. They know who the cartel people are. And they just get as close as they can. The guy may run, so they have another team that he runs into. They're going to get him. And then they're going to maybe have a fight with him. They might even have a gunfight with him, probably not. And they arrest him. That's it, he's off the streets, but they're going to get him all off the streets. So all the crew that the cartel has guarding this possession of theirs this housing project are off the street. So what's the cartel move? Well, they put another team in there. And what happens? The next day, the day after, they do another raid on them and they're off the streets. They're in jail. You think the cartel will do it a third time? I doubt it. If they do, they're off the streets. Now, it's not hard to get rid of the cartels. It really isn't. Now, how did they get rid of the other reason? So the cartels aren't going into the rich neighborhoods and standing on the corner looking like a gangbanger, selling cocaine and crack or whatever, right? The people in the rich neighborhoods are going to phone him in as a suspicious person. The cops are going to come. They're going to confront him. He's going to come up on the interview really bad. They're going to search him and you're going to arrest him. That's the reality, okay? If they try to shoot it out with the cops, they may kill the cops, but they're probably not going to get away clean. So what about the illegals? Well, let's talk about how Trump would have to get rid of the illegals. So certain cities is loaded with illegals, right? Because Biden administration's transporting them there. So there's probably 50 or 100 cities loaded with them. That's about it, okay? Maybe 200 cities. So what he does is he sends a team of ICE agents to a city. Maybe he sends like 50, right? And they know where the so-called illegal migrants are working and hanging out, and they go there. And they start setting up checkpoints in the street. What do you think they're going to do? Knock on the doors? Who is it? Damigre, open the door. They're not going to do that. Nobody's going to open the door. They'll say, go away, you have a search warrant. They're not going to, no Anglese, they're not going to talk to them. They got to get them out on the street. Now, if they go to every apartment with battering rams, which they're never going to do, yeah, they'd get a good haul. But they're going to work the streets. They're not going to go work the apartments. They're going to work the streets. Sooner or later, they got to come out. They need food, water, liquor, drugs, entertainment, recreation, or whatever they like to do. So they're going to start challenging them on the street. They'll walk over, they could have uniforms. Some will have uniforms, some will be in plain clothes, and they'll say, hola, damigre, and they'll ask them for ID. And these people are going to, not have ID. You all know tango, I think they say something. They're going to say, no, I don't have any ID in Spanish. And these guys are going to speak Spanish. If they don't, the guy next to them won't speak Spanish. And they'll have other languages they speak to. They'll have plenty of linguistic talent. And they could use Google Translate. Hold the phone, tell the guy to talk into Google Translate in Greek or whatever he speaks, and then hit the translate and it comes out in English. They can get it done. So they, no ID, what are they going to do? Doesn't speak English, no ID. Where do you live? They'll be communicating in his own language. And, where's your bank? Where do you work? Do you have a car? Do you have a driver's? It's going to fall apart. Boom, in the van he goes, right? And deportation begins. Now, when they start deporting them to like Nicaragua or Mexico, whatever country you want to talk about, Colombia, a lot of these countries are going to say they don't want them back. What does America do then? Venezuela says they don't want them back. They sent all the gangbangers up there and they don't want them back. So what the heck does America do? Invade Venezuela? I don't know what they're going to do. We'll have to see. So a lot of times they're gonna compel the country to take them back, and they will. So are they gonna process these people legally through the courts? This is a conundrum. If the person, the so-called illegal, never filed for asylum, I don't think America has, under Trump, I don't think they're going to do much with the courts. I think they have to, but Trump could set up like kangaroo courts with extra judges at the ICE headquarters, and they just process 500-600 every day in one court with one judge. It's just 30 seconds and it's in and out. They read a list and they just get them out. Then they take them back to a center and they get ready to ship them back on buses or planes or whatever they're going to do. And they get rid of them. Are they going to incarcerate them? It's expensive, it's time consuming. I doubt Trump would want them. He'd probably want them arrested in their other country in a matter of a week or two. He wouldn't want to keep them in jail. It's an expense. Why the heck would he want to do that? So now what do they do with people that are here lawfully walking around in the same city? They hit this checkpoint and they say, where's your ID? Well, if the person has one of those driver's licenses where they verify ID and stuff like that, which most states do, then they're going to say, okay, sir, or ma'am, thank you, have a good day, right? A lot of these migrants, illegals, can get driver's licenses now, so that may not work. And state ID cards, the same thing. They probably get those. They just show up and say, hey, I'm under asylum. This is my name. This is my address. And then they just make something up and their fingerprints aren't on file and that's it. Now they may be on file. So that may not be good enough. In these asylum locations, they may need more than that. So what kind of ID is more than that? You see the problem right now? Well, maybe if you have a driver's license, you have credit cards that were issued a few years ago, you have carry concealed weapons license or a professional license, like a hairdresser or a massage therapist or something like that, and you can get into an interview and tell them where you worked, how long you worked there, what school you went to, the years you went, name some teachers, where your parents were born and lived and worked. You're gonna pass you. But my point is that to do this correctly, Trump needs a new form of ID. Now, the passport would work because the Americans are not really in the habit of giving them a passport, not a travel document, a passport. So if you're born in America, you can get a passport. So if you happen to have a passport, which is probably 20% of America or 15% or something like that, you would have to carry your passport, probably along with another picture ID, and then they would look at that and say, have a nice day. So what Trump's likely going to have to come up with is another form of ID that illegals are going to have no right to get to. And you're looking at a year or two on that. So what I'm telling you here is Trump can get a lot of illegals out. If we take the Border Patrol guy, the big shot that had 26 years in there, and we run with this 30 million figure, Trump in a year, maybe he'll get 1 million out, maybe 2 million. Maybe after 3 years, he'll get 3 or 4 million a year out, But at the end of his 4-year term, I would think he'd get maybe 25% of them out, which would be like 7.5 million. If it's 50 million, it would be much less. He's not going to get that many out. He's going to get millions if he had 4 years, which he doesn't. Prophetically, it won't work. But, you know, it's a slow process, and I think to effectively do it, he has to come out with a new type of ID that these people definitely don't have. And that's going to get resisted. Now, let's say they just get clever and they just start interviewing people and they don't bother with the ID, which could likely be the case. So how does the interview go? Like I told you, who you married to, where'd you meet her, where'd you meet him, where have you worked, name 3 places you worked, where'd you go to school, name the grade school, this and that. Tell us the streets your school was on. You went to Calvin Cleavage High School or something like that. Okay, what were the name of the streets, the 2 streets? Tell me something about the school. Where did you go for lunch? Where was the parking lot? You know, the aliens will fall apart. The illegals will fall apart. Now they have to go into Google and look this stuff up, which they can do. Where do you bank? How long you been banking there? Oh, where did you bank before? Okay. Have you ever borrowed any money? Have you ever made loans? You know, it just goes on and on. Tell me the names and phone numbers of some of your friends that are not illegal aliens, you know, that know you for 10 years. And, you know, they could do it without ID. So ID may never happen. It would be brief interviews. It would probably take them an hour to get the person, get a story from the person, and then verify the story. And they'd have to go to a supervisor and decide if they're going to throw this person out. And if the person says, "Well, you're throwing me out. I was born here. I was born in this hospital. My mother there." Okay, where's your mother now? Let me call her. Where's your wife? Where's your boss? Where's your co-workers? Where's your neighbors? Give me the names. Give me the phone numbers. And if he has that, well, and the neighbors and the employers seem to be legit, well, then he's not getting thrown out. So it can be done with interviews. But you're not going to get, 5 million out the first year. Forget that. You're not going to get anywhere near that. It's just too much work. It's just way too much. It's just not gonna. It's not gonna happen. Okay. All these things Trump's trying to do is going to be slow. Getting rid of the cartels, no, that's fast. That's easy. That's fast. It's not a problem. The bosses are going to probably leave on their own, but it'll be difficult to round them up. But without their soldiers, then they're worthless. What cartels do is they bring people into the cartel and they become low-level soldiers, and they do what they're told. They risk their life and their freedom for the cartel. Many of them wind up in prison. The cartel doesn't care about them. They're pawns, and that's the bulk of them. If the regular cartel member excels in his duties and stuff like that, they start elevating him, and then to get anywhere in the cartel, he has to be a Satan bot, of course. But, he can move up, and then he's not as exposed as them. But the real bosses are super insulated from the troops, from the run-of-the-mill soldiers, which they don't care about, So if you get rid of the soldiers, the bosses in the cartel are still there, but what are they going to do? They're not going to go out in the street and sell drugs. They're not going to go rob a bank. They're not going to go shake people down. They're not going to go have shootouts with the cops. They want other people to do that. So they fall apart. he could do things with tariffs and the economy rather rapidly. There's a bunch of stuff the guy could do. Let me go through my notes. So with Trump and his foreign tariffs, he's going to um, he's going to be pretty successful on that, probably pretty early, but till you really feel it, it'll be at least a year. Prophetically, the time's not holding up. Trump says he's at war with the LGBT community and he wants to stop any teachings of this lifestyle in the schools and the grooming in the schools. Well, that's going to be a substantial amount of people that are going to be super opposed to him because he's threatening their lifestyle. Um, so when Trump gets rid of the IRS, he's going to start with different kinds of banking. He already has his own digital currency that he's going to invoke. And he may let that be anonymous because he's not that worried about the taxes anymore because he did away with the IRS. So he could restore banking the way it was in the 60s where it was anonymous, numbered accounts and stuff like that. So stop harassing the people with sanctions for not following American banking rules when the bank is not in America. It could be in Hong Kong, Belize, Europe, you know. So he stops that. But that could cause people to use foreign bank accounts because their money is basically immune from seizure. Not entirely, but mostly it is. See, America has a lousy legal system. You could sue somebody in America, okay, and go in with your lawyers and ask the court to keep the lawsuit secret from the person you're suing. And then you present your evidence to the judge, and then you post a bond that if it proves that you were wrong and you seize this person's assets, you post a bond with the court of a lot of money that this person could collect from you for the damages done to him. Now, this is often done to small businesses, like somebody coming out on the internet making games or something like that. And the big game manufacturers that are Satan bots want to crush them. So they go to the big law firms with 600-800 lawyers that charge $1,000, $2,000 an hour or whatever. And they put together this ex parte secret lawsuit where they file the lawsuit in the court, but they never serve the defendant. And then they present the case to the judge without the defendant ever appearing. And this goes on a lot, believe me. And the judge says, okay, you post the bond, And they say, look, Your Honor, we want to grab his bank accounts so he doesn't spend money on lawyers. So we have some sort of assets to recover for our damages. The judge says, okay. So then what happens is they get a document from the judge and they file it on his house. So they clog the title. He can't sell it or raise money, borrow against it. They do it, they clog the title on his cars. He can't sell them or borrow against them. They freeze his bank account. They shut down his credit cards. Or they may not shut down his credit cards. And then they get the judge to issue an order that he's not allowed to spend more than $2,000 to $3,000 or $4,000 a month, even though his income could be $500,000 a month, without the permission of the court, all without him ever having his day in court. This is ex parte lawsuit. It's common in America. It goes on. That's why a lot of people want to bank overseas, because if you try, American companies don't even want to bother going overseas to attack somebody's bank account unless they think they're going to get a few $1 million or more out of it, okay? The American lawyer is not a lawyer in these foreign countries. So the American lawyer has to hire a law firm in these foreign countries. That's number one. Number two, they can't go in and play this ex parte game in a foreign country. See, in America, the idea is to freeze the guy's assets so he can't get a lawyer. He has to go to the judge and ask the judge for money to hire a lawyer. And if he wants to hire a really good law firm, the judge is going to say that's too much money. So the judge is working with the big law firm. Don't think you're ever going to get a fair shake in court anywhere in the world, okay? Don't fall into that trap. It's stupid. Satan's the god of this age, and don't believe that. So they, they make him hire the corner lawyer who doesn't know what the heck to do. They're not going to let this guy hire a lawyer for $900 an hour who knows what the heck he's doing, and then the big firm just basically crushes him. And he loses his house, his cars, his bank accounts, and everything else. And this goes on in America. And Trump is never going to stop this because he does it himself. So this is common in America. It's a joke. So people go overseas. So some young computer guys that make computer games want to go after a guy that lives in Chicago or Florida or Texas or wherever, right? They want to go after him. So what they'll do is they'll file the lawsuit where the home office of the company suing the guy is. So right away they move the lawsuit away from that guy's where he lives, and they put it where their home office is. Now this is illegal and it shouldn't be allowed, but they do it and they get away with it. Because they say, well, that's where the victims and the damage was done here at our home office. And the crooked judges allow them to do it because they're big law firms. They get judges appointed and they contribute a lot of money politically. So so now the guy has to fight a lawsuit 1,800 miles away from where he lives. Okay? Then they grab all his assets. He gets up in the morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he sees tow trucks towing his cars away. His house, the title is clogged. He can't get money out of his bank account. People are coming in, trying to search his computers or take his computer. Who knows what extent this is going to take, right? So let's say the guy makes $1 million a month or $500,000 a month. So he keeps 90% of his money in an offshore bank in, I don't know, any country, pick your country, it doesn't matter. And he keeps his money over there, right? So what happens now? Well, they can grab the 10% of his money in the local Chase Manhattan Bank in America. If his house is not rented, if his house is rented, if the guy's smart, he has a rented house, you can't confiscate a rented house. If his cars are leased and they're not purchased, that's like a rental house. You can't confiscate a leased car. It doesn't belong to the guy you're suing, it belongs to the lease company, and he just pays rent every month to use it. Okay? Can they take his furniture? Then generally that's not going to happen. That's post-judgment stuff, right? So when they realize what happened, then they try to get the judge to compel him to repatriate the money from the foreign bank account to America, where they can garnish it and freeze it. This goes on. I'm telling you, this is true. They do this. So then the guy could possibly be forced to do this, but if he's smart, after he realizes they're grabbing his assets, he goes right to the airport and leaves the country and makes sure they don't serve him in another country. They can serve you through the embassy. They have an embassy representative come and serve you with papers and stuff like that. But if you don't register with the embasy's not going to know where you are. You know, it's not hard to do that, you know. So then they've lost control. What did they get? Nothing. Did they get him put out of business? No. What do the smart ones do? They keep everything offshore. They just stay in America, or if they're really smart, they leave America. So what the company now has to do if the guy's out of America is they got to go hire their law firm for $1,000 an hour, and they're going to want a big retainer like 100, 200,000, 300,000 to get into the case, and they're going to study the case and eat up money, and then they're going to tell them, well, we need to use our connections in Austria, because I'm just picking a place. The guy's banking in Austria. So we got to hire a law firm in Austria. So now they're paying $1,000, $1,500 an hour to the law firm in America. And the law firm in Austria ain't working for $100 an hour. He sees the American law firm bleeding this deep pocket client. So he's going to want maybe not $1,500. He might want $700, $800 an hour. Or he might want more. He might want $2,000 or $3,000 an hour. So now they're paying double legal fees. And the lawyer in Austria can't go do ex parte confiscation of the bank account, because this guy is going to make sure that he goes to a country where this is impossible. And he makes sure by talking to the lawyers there. And any of the lawyers familiar with banking will tell you, how do you find a lawyer familiar with the bank? You say, well, you call a bank and you talk to them and say, I'm interested in opening an account, but I want to understand how to structure it with a trust, an LLC, a private corporation, or a bearer share. What do I need a lawyer. Can you refer me to a banking lawyer who could educate me? Yeah, sure. Here, I'll give you 3 lawyers. And you take the bank references and you call the lawyers up. You go there, you probably got to drop, maybe $1,000 or something like that to sit down with the guy for, over coffee for an hour or two and get your questions answered. It might only be 20 minutes. If the guy says, yeah, they could do an ex parte, thank you, it's been a pleasure meeting you, see you around the campus, and go to another country, right? So it's not hard to figure that out, okay? So they know that's not going to happen. So now the American company has to pay American lawyers to fly over to Austria, work with the lawyers in Austria, and conduct a trial against the guy in Austria. But they can't grab his bank account. So what happens? I'll tell you what happens. The guy that's in Austria that's selling these computer games gets served with the bank account and goes to his lawyer. What's the first thing his lawyer says? Oh, you can beat these guys easy. Call my friend in Switzerland and open up a bank account there through a different corporation, and then just transfer the assets over there and move your assets to Switzerland and go there. So just default on the lawsuit in Austria. What are they going to get? They're going to get nothing. They can't confiscate the money in Switzerland. They won't even know it's there. And it's a different corporation. It would be a massive, elaborate lawsuit to prove it was that. And then you just move the money from Switzerland to Italy and have a different corporation in Italy, or go to Hong Kong, or go to some other country, and then you see how it works? That's what the smart people do to fight the big corporations. They can't win when you go overseas. The American legal system and banking system is horrible. So these big companies pick off the little companies when they become to be a competitive threat. And that's it. Because the laws in Europe and most places of the world never allow them to do the evil things that they do. And you don't have to go to crappy countries to do this. You could go to pretty solid countries and set up bank accounts there, you know. So now you know how rotten America, the courts are. They're really rotten. I mean, it's just about unbelievable rotten. How something evolved like that with ex parte lawsuits, where you never have a day in court and all your money is seized and grabbed. And they do this all the time. Now, Trump also wants to make war on the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. And that's Big Pharma. And they're going to come after him. Governor Newsom of California said he's going to protect the people in California with their debaucherous, immoral lifestyles against the policies of Trump. So that's the beginning of ruler fighting ruler. However, I have not, and I've looked for this, I've not seen or heard of any other governors saying they were going to do the same thing, let alone unite with Newsom and fight Trump. He's apparently going to fight Trump on states' rights. Would California succeed from the union? I doubt they'd ever even think about it, because they get so much federal money and subsidies and stuff like that for their poor people and stuff. I don't know. I don't think they'll ever do that. They will keep their borders open if Trump lets them, but he won't let them. Speaking of California, they have a forest wildfire there that burned 130 homes in Los Angeles as of yesterday. That's interesting. Guskard says he'll kindle fires in and around the cities of the daughter of Babylon when it goes down. I don't think it's going down this week, but you never know. It happens suddenly. The US and the UK are attacking Yemen. They've done it several times. I want you to understand that if they attack Yemen, they'll attack Iran. Yemen is just a division of Iran. It's a proxy, a satellite country. And they will attack Iran. Don't think they won't. Last night they brought another air refueling tanker plane to Saudi Arabia. They have a bunch of them in Saudi Arabia now. I think the Saudis are going back to America because of Trump. They were afraid of Biden because he's so wishy-washy and will stab Israel in the back, and they're afraid he'll stab him in the back. So they were trying to get closer to Iran so they weren't going to be on the receiving end of punishment from Iran. But now I think they're shifting back to America. It appears so. And that's the way Saudi Arabia rolls, you know. They go, what's best for them. I'm looking at the chat now. There was no notice from YouTube. It was some juvenile. It's not the first time they put those in there. It's just nonsense. I just gotta block the children that come in here to insult adults and think that's a great way to begin life. Yes, some states have no income tax. Some states have no sales tax. Very few. Florida has no income tax. Boy, we got a real flood of juveniles coming around and heckling. Boy, I wonder what was wrong with their household growing up. Someone's saying Trump USA. Hey, he already won the election. All right, I threw the garbage out. Let me get back on my notes. It sure looks to me like America's going to hit Iran with Israel. Ukraine is shooting drones 500 kilometers, which is 300 miles into Russia now. Russia was shooting drones down over Moscow yesterday, and, you know, that situation is heating up. He's not shooting long range missiles, he's shooting drones, or, you know, suicide drones and things like that. Okay. So that's not making Putin happy. Listen, if Biden wants to make trouble for the Republicans and make Trump look bad, and they would do that because they would be thinking about trying to impeach Trump during his term. Don't forget that. And if they make him look bad, a lot of his supporters and followers could turn on him. Don't forget that. It happens. It could happen. And they might work for that regard. So they light up Iran, which lights up the Middle East, which is likely going to cause Russia to try to help Iran, and probably China and North Korea will try to do something, and it can light up everything. And that can make life very, very difficult for Trump. So for one, it isolates Trump and America into the Middle East in the early stages of the war, leaving Russia and China and North Korea alone. So they don't care about the Middle East that much. So don't think that's not why America's bringing B-52s into the Middle East and why they're bringing refueling tankers, lots of F-15s, A-10 Warthogs, lots of warships, all kinds of stuff. 58,000 troops in the Middle East now. They're not letting Iran run the Middle East. They're going to take out Iran, and that's going to be blowback, and Trump's going to inherit it. And they're already starting with the bombing in Yemen, and I think that's going to go further. They're not hitting Hezbollah or Hamas because they don't want Israel. They want Israel to do that. They are hitting Syria bases because they're hitting American troops, the Iran-backed militias in Syria and Iraq. And they even do a little bit of hitting back in Iraq, but predominantly Syria. So America is going to hit Iran in my book, and we know from Jeremiah 49, Elam, which is Iran, Iraq, and Syria, is going to be destroyed so bad that people leave, get dispersed to all the nations of the world, and the sword follows them until they get cut off, which is their plans for Israel, and it happens to them. All these people you read about, you know, Trump and Biden and Putin and Xi Jinping and all the leaders of this world, the UN bosses, the EU bosses, and all that, they don't ever quote the Bible. Do you ever hear any of them talk about when the two witnesses appear? Do you ever hear any of them talk about Bible prophecy being fulfilled? Never, not one of them. They're all ungodly. Not one of them. So what they tell you and what they think is going to happen isn't going to happen. Because they're giving you a godless overview. Can it be Trump that destroys Iran, not Biden? Sure. Definitely could be, but it looks like it's going to be America. And I think America wants to create as much trouble for Trump as they can. That's why they just gave $6 billion in military aid to Ukraine. Trump wants to wind down the Ukraine-Russia war. Trump wants to have Ukraine give back the Donbass region, tell Putin to take it and go his way, and impose peace. Well, Zelensky's not going to like it, Putin's not going to like it, but Trump is going to try to push it, probably won't. So, to make, Biden, to make Zelensky more resilient to listening to Trump, he gives him $6 billion. And that might not be the end of it. The beginning of January, you might give him another $6 billion. So then Zelensky's got enough money to last until the summer without listening to Trump. And then trouble with Ukraine get worse. The $6 billion he just gave him might enable Zelensky to last till March or something like that. I don't know. He can give him more. Other countries can give him more. They can keep this guy going till next summer. And what's Trump do? Trump suck and win. And now Trump inherits a problem with Ukraine and Russia. And then he inherits a problem in the whole Middle East. And then North Korea could attack South Korea. China probably won't do anything. North Korea attacks South Korea. And now he's got a problem there. So they hit him with a multitude of problems. And watch what he does about it. Trump is not God. He's not the Messiah. He's a guy. He's a billionaire S-bot. That's it. He's a Satan bot. That's all he is. He definitely wants to build the economy up against America, but he definitely doesn't want to be a man of God and follow the Bible and do things. He's obviously not that. He wants to get rid of the LGBTQ because it's gonna raise his popularity, and the LGBTQ community is opposed to him anyway. So he takes a group of people that never want to vote for him and makes things very difficult for them, and then picks up a lot more right-wing votes. Oh, look what Trump did. He's a great guy. Trump going up against the Federal Reserve is going to be very interesting because that's the elite of the elites. Those are your trillionaires. And Trump probably knows exactly who they are, but he's not going to tell you or I. And I don't know what the Federal Reserve is going to do when they fight back against Trump. They could mess with the money policies and make the economy harder to fix with Trump. See, there's a lot of opposition to Trump, and they're going to do everything they can to make him a mess and get the people to rather quickly start thinking about impeaching Trump or trying to get new criminal cases put on Trump or something like that. I don't know exactly how it's going to materialize yet, but it looks like it's brewing. None of the nations are pro-God in the world and don't think that God's showing them favor. And we don't read anywhere in Jeremiah 50:51 or Isaiah 47 where America repents. And their actions, it would have to be more than just verbal repentance. Their actions would have to demonstrate clearly serious repentance, and then the Lord may deal with them differently, but we don't read anything like that. See, God puts his people through cycles. You had at Pentecost, after Yeshua was resurrected, people got God puts us through cycles. The first cycle was the people got the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, which previous to that, the only people that had the Holy Spirit were the Israeli kings, the prophets, and the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. That was it. Now all the believers were getting the Holy Spirit. That was outrageously different in a great way. Next, when he appears in the clouds, the believers in Israel were going to get everlasting life, which is not eternity. They could still die, but they'll live a long time like before the flood. Then what happens when New Jerusalem comes and you eat of the tree of life and drink of the water of life? There's no death in New Jerusalem, so you don't die anymore, yet you still have, in my opinion, a flesh body. And then what happens when Jehovah comes down after the millennium, after Satan's released, and so he gets the nations to surround Jerusalem, and New Jerusalem is the sand of the sea. Father God Jehovah comes down, burns up the whole universe. We meet them in the air because there's nothing left to stand on, and go up on the clouds to heaven. Well, in the blink of an eye, we get converted to a spiritual body, and that's how we go up. And that then the next cycle is you're in the third heaven with Father God Jehovah. Now, what happens after that, I don't know. We're not told about life in heaven. It's obviously pretty darn good, but we don't know what goes on up there. It says with Satan, in the beginning, he says, but then he's describing Satan, and then he says iniquity was founded on lawlessness. Then there's a temple up in heaven. So obviously there's some sort of law in heaven that people have to abide by. I don't think God lets you go around and commit murder and you gotta and lie and worship other gods. So there's something up there. We'll know as the time comes for sure. But it's a little early right now. We don't need to know all of that. And let's read Luke 21:24. I got to throw a Bible teaching in. I'm not going to do it without Bible teaching. So Luke 21:24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive unto all nations. Now that's the 70 AD Exodus, when they got into captivity in 70 AD. Okay, it's not coming again. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Goyim, which means those without God, till the times of the Goyim be fulfilled. So, Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Goyim, the heathen, those without God, till the time of the Goyim or the heathen be fulfilled. Now, we know that we have, now some of you don't know this, Daniel 9:24 says there's 2 70s, not 70 weeks. That's absurd. Every Hebrew translation is the same. It's Shavim, 2 70-year periods. The first was the Babylonian captivity, which tells us that's a 70-year period, not just a 70. And then the second 70 starts with redemption, with the appearing of the Son of Man in the clouds. And that's when they receive everlasting life, and that begins the second 70. And at the end, the beginning of the first 70, the moon turns to blood and the sun goes dark. At the close of the second 70, the moon goes dark, the sun goes dark, and the stars fall. And that's when Yeshua returns in Revelation 19 down to earth with all the angels, and New Jerusalem comes. The beast and false prophet go in the lake of fire, Satan goes in the pit, and all of that. Okay? Then there's a judgment of rewards for the believers in New Jerusalem. And, okay, so That's the big lies of the church, is this nonsense with Daniel 9:24 meaning 70 weeks. There's no way in the world that it means weeks. It's 270s. Every Hebrew translation back to 900 AD says the same. Okay, and all the English translations botch it up except one, Smith's literal translation, who self-published it. All right, a long time ago. So anyway, moving along. We see in Malachi 3, I was going to cover this the other day. I don't think I did. In Malachi 3, we see, but it reads like this: But who may abide, that's in verse 2, verse 1, Behold, I will send my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. That's Elijah. And the Adonai, that's the glory of God of Israel, whom you seek, shall suddenly come to his temple. So the temple precedes the glory of God of Israel. So there's a temple there. Suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger or the Malach of the covenant, whom you delight in, that's Elijah. Behold, he shall come, saith Jehovah of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? Who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like a fuller's soap. He shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi, and purge them as gold and silver, and they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto Jehovah, as in the days of old, as in the former years. Well, the Dome of the Rock is not really where the temple will be. It's maybe 800-900, 1,000 feet or something like that away. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock are right near where the temple would be. The mountain for the temple, Mount Zion, is not here yet. I expect God will put that there as he gives us the next temple. And I've covered that like 10 or 15 times in Ezekiel 37, the last 3 verses. God places this next temple here. This is the house not made with human hands. We build the altar, not the temple. We might decorate the temple, but we don't build it. We're never given plans to build it. Moving along. This temple, do you think God's going to put this temple there while the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque are just 4 or 5, 6 minute walk away, quite visible from the temple? Well, he says he's a jealous God, and we're not supposed to have images to other gods, or shrines or temples to other gods, or worship other gods, or have other gods before us. This would be having other gods before us. So I think it's indisputable that this Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque and various minarets around the area are going to be destroyed before the temple comes. I'm sure Elijah's going to take care of that, with the help of the people, probably. But that's not going to be there. Okay, it would. God says he's a jealous God. It would break so much scripture. I can't believe it would ever happen. And if it was happening, the offerings of Israel would not be acceptable unto the Lord, because the Lord would be rather upset with the Levites for not getting rid of this altar to another God and making him jealous and upset and breaking the 10 Commandments. You shall not have other gods before you. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not going to be there. So does that mean Jerusalem will not be trodden down in the Gentiles? No. Because towards the end of the second 70, in Ezekiel 8 to 11, which is the great day of the Lord, which is Gog and Magog, also Zechariah 14 is Gog and Magog, and the whole book of Joel is Gog and Magog. So when they set the image up that provokes the jealousy in Ezekiel 8 and 9, it's in the northern gate between the inner and outer courtyard, and that layout, architecturally speaking, is the next temple. It doesn't apply to Solomon's temple, Zerubbabel's temple, or Herod's temple. They don't have that setup of the gate, and the gate on the northern side connecting the inner and outer court. They don't have such a gate. It's only the next temple. So we see the people there doing evil, bowing, turning their back to the temple, and bowing and worshiping the sun god, Tammuz, I think, and putting idols on the walls of the temple and stuff like that. So when that happens, Jerusalem is again trodden down of the heathen, because these people are not heathen, because they're not serving God, they're serving heathen gods or false gods. False gods would be very accurate. And when the Gog and Magog battle happens, they get taken away. And if you take the trouble to read this, you realize in Ezekiel chapter 9, the ones that are upset about the evil done in the temple have the mark placed in their forehead by God through the angels, and nothing bad happens to them. They don't have to leave Jerusalem. In Zechariah 14, they stay there. Yet half of Jerusalem goes into captivity, and the women get raped and the house is looted. Now, the half going into captivity concludes the time of times and half a time. It doesn't mean 1260 days or 42 months. It's captivity. Time of times and half a time is not calendar days or anything, or calendar months. The first time was Egypt, the second time Babylon, the third time Rome, and the half time is when you read of half of Jerusalem going into captivity in Zechariah 14 verses 1 and 2, maybe verse 3 also. And you see the people that remain not going anywhere, they just stay in Jerusalem, nothing happens to them. And the temple gets reconsecrated. That's in Daniel 8, I think, maybe verse 23. It doesn't get destroyed. And that is the end of Jerusalem being trodden down in the Goyim after that happens. Now, there's a large period of time, a 70-year period till it's over, but probably 60-some years till it starts. So we live relatively good for a long period of time. But then the great falling away comes, which the church ignores. The church ignores everything. Their doctrine are like Marvel comic books. So I just wanted to tell you that that's when the Jerusalem trodden down and the Gentiles really comes to its close forever. But previous to that, it'll be for a long time very good. So you're going to have, another cycle with everlasting life and great riches and living without bars and walls or fear, and just have a good time for several decades. Then it'll get bad. So you've got a great rest and peaceful time ahead of you to look forward to. I hope that helps. Because these days are rough. Don't ignore your spiritual warfare. Every day pound the unclean spirits, like I've been telling you. Hit the stock exchanges, hit the hospitals, hit the airports. Use different airports, different stock exchanges, okay? Different parliaments and congresses of different countries. Hit their intelligence agencies, hit their military offices, colonel and above. Hit the cruise lines, hit the airlines, people on ABC Airline, on any of their jets, wherever they are in the world. I command you, unclean spirits, to depart from these people now. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach. Get them that way. Get them in the airports. Get the churches. Don't forget the churches. Okay? Don't waste your time on the entertainers, and they're rather irrelevant, Go after the board of directors of the big corporations, Standard & Poor 500, 100, Dow Jones, industrial average companies. Remember the stock markets, future markets, commodity markets, bond markets all over the world. Okay? And keep pouring it on him. He keeps picking on us. Pick on him. Give him too much to worry about. He's got all these wars and stuff brewing to worry about. Give him more stuff to worry about. And you'll see, in my opinion, I think your life, in terms of being harassed by him, turning people against you, is going to stop. Now, he turns, let's say, a co-worker against you, or an employer against you, or a teacher or a neighbor. You have problems, and you could retaliate against those people and attack the unclean spirits manipulating those people and throw them out of them and so forth. But why stop there? Get the big important ones that Satan really has to worry about. Don't just go for the target he presented to you. Go for them, but then go after other targets and give him a nightmare. Keep it up and you'll see. I think we'll see our life improve in terms of this jackass, idiot demons starting to turn people against us, I mean, it's disgusting what they do. They'll turn your neighbors against you, your boss against you, co-workers, people in school with you if you're young, people you do business with, anybody he can. Or his demons too. So go get his people that he cares about. He's only going to throw people that he doesn't care about at you. Go after the big fish, his real important people, over and 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 over, and don't let up and watch how he starts making mistakes. He's no God. He's not an angel anymore. He's a fallen angel. He's nothing. He's a liar and a deceiver, and he uses people to do his work, and that's how he gets you through people. He doesn't throw lightning bolts at you or fire and brimstone. He gets you through people. Get him through people. But get him where it really hurts. Go after the Federal Reserve Board of Directors every day. Go after the board of directors of the banks. Go after the credit bureaus. Go after big companies' board of directors, the car companies, real estate companies, just whoever, just create big problems, but go after his prime targets. Go after the weapon manufacturers. Okay? Go after the courts. The big companies. When you fight in the spirit, you win. When you fight in the flesh, now in these days, you might win, maybe, but fighting in the spirit is what you need to do. Okay, so I hope I was able to provide some helpful information today. Let me check the chat very quickly. I don't think I've got much going on here. Okay, so I'm Moshe. Please pray for me and my wife for peace, safety, protection, and joy. Pray for healing, especially for my wife, me too. Pray for our finances, that's always important. And pray for our animals and pets to be happy, healthy, and whole. They're all rescues. Pray for better videos, more insights. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Don't get sucked into this Trump thing. He's not working for God. He's working for Trump and his dynasty that he wants to build. He's not a man of God. He's not working God's will because he wants to. Maybe God's manipulating him or something, but he's not for God. And don't make that mistake. What Bible prophecies has he ever spoken to you about? Has he spoken to you about a temple, the glory of God of Israel, Elijah, Apostle John? What? The restoration of Israel, the year of redemption, the year of recompenses, the day of vengeance. It's not of God. Don't fall for that. Okay? Okay. All right. And I send my shalom to all those who love Yeshua HaMashiach. And I'm out. Thank you.